Hey everyone, I am Jack, and this is my visual project. So, for my visual project, I had chapter 22, I believe it was, and that was Fighting for the Four Freedoms, World War II, which I actually really enjoyed this chapter, and I was happy that I was assigned to it. So, I did a digital poster, and I just kind of compiled a lot of photography that I uh, really thought encapsulated the whole World War, stuff that I really stuck out to me that I liked, and I just kind of compiled it onto this. But I'll go through the photos and kind of talk about them and how they relate to the discussion in the course reader post. There was not a case study for this chapter, so I'm relating these photos to those two. So I'll start with the textbook. In the textbook, Fauner goes through basically all aspects of the war. He talks about on a global front what this war was, and then also internally in America. But the encapsulating thesis of it was that despite there was all this unity in America and like a very common foe and regime in the Nazi Empire and Hitler, that the American people could get behind and fight against all aspects of American people, immigrants, Black people, women. There was still a lot of internal conflicts and debates and dilemmas in America that kind of came to the surface and were kind of lying under the surface of this joint unity. But I'll start by just saying kind of what the war did, or like how America came into this war, because it gravely changed after. I mean, America came in one country and then left a completely different one. Tons of different significance in this war in all aspects of American life. So as we remember coming into this war, we're coming out of the Depression, and so just economic prosperity was just not at all what was happening in America. So I kind of want to, hopefully this will zoom in, but I want to focus on this picture first, kind of see it, which is the VJ picture of the sailor kissing, or I don't know if that's a sailor actually, but he does, I think it's two strangers basically embracing in a kiss on the streets after the victory over Japan. And that kind of symbolizes, I know I'm cutting to the end here, but it symbolizes just the unity and as well as the prosperity that followed this war on an economic front. I think this photo is a nice juxtaposition, excuse me, compared to the World War, or not World War II, sorry, the Great Depression picture of the mother with her two kids just looking like completely ravaged and despaired, versus this just two strangers just completely embracing. I think that's very a stark difference, and it's nice to see that it came in this way, and then through the war, through production, and putting men to work and everybody to work, excuse me, Black people, women, um, that we were able to come into this economic prosperity. But so kind of, I feel like a theme for this is that there's a lot of like dual aspects to the war, in the sense that there's a lot of goods that come out of it. For one, the desegregation of parts of the army, or excuse me, parts of the military. I have this photo here of this first naval, or not naval, excuse me, Air Force unit of African American fighter pilots. You can see them here. So that's something that's, you know, never been accounted for. And FDR did that and also gave them defense jobs as well in other aspects of the federal government. And he passed that executive order that said, I think it was Fair Employment Practice Commission, that basically these people can not segregate against employing African American people. So that, for just a social and civil sense, is a huge win. But later, when that after the war is over, people kind of want to see it go back to the status quo. So that civil rights issue comes kind of to the forefront of American thinking, especially when the people that America's at war with, and I'll just go over to this Auschwitz photo, are it's kind of not great quality, but we're going to war against someone who is basically killing people based off their race, which the American public, just as a majority, agrees that that is wrong. But yet we have segregation with Black people and discrimination. So it's just kind of odd. It seems very hypocritical. So I think that being so hypocritical really just brought it to the forefront. of thinking, just as why is this happening? And similar with Black people as women, who I'll just scroll up here. So we get unity in the sense of these women are now providing for themselves and they're working for America. They're not just in, the house or kitchen or raising kids. They're actually out here working, which I mean, American society would not allow up to this point, but for just what the war demanded, we needed it from all certain types of people. So this is really great to see women out here working. They also really enjoy it after. In the discussion, we were talking about how these women didn't all want to go back to the way their lives were. So this sort of feminist and women's movement of wanting to be able to support themselves and just not be completely reliant on a man, that is brought up as well. So we see people like women and African Americans are getting jobs and shaping their lives a little differently. But after the war, some people want them to go back to the way it was before the war. But the people that were involved, like the women and Black people, they want to keep the way that keep the treatment that has been going on during the war and the opportunities that they have. So you can just kind of see there's kind of a duality to this whole war. So I think I'll go back down to some more stuff kind of about the unity of it with FDR here in the big three picture, which is just, I really love this photo. It's very cool to see all of these leaders together, but just kind of shows the way America was growing into being the number one, unifier and like fighters against the Nazi regime, and how you see Stalin there, who later becomes an enemy of the US, and Winston Churchill, all just using their these foreign leaders, international group coming together to help fight against this war, which is great. And also just FDR's personality and fireside chats, all that, the New Deal, everything. He's just unifying the country to be able to go into this war. And also what FDR is trying to push is this freedom from want. So I'll go up here for that. We can see freedom want in the bottom right corner. So that's another kind of division that comes about later after the war. So FDR wants kind of not socialist completely, but he wants people to not have a freedom from poverty and housing and be able to own clothes and take care of their children. He's not promising wealth and the complete prosperity to everyone. There will still be hardships and stuff, but a basic way of living that all Americans should be guaranteed to. But then there's the other side of it that wants to go for free enterprise and complete kind of government hands-off laissez-faire of economic system. So that's just another debate and division that comes about after the war. So it's interesting to see how all of this stuff just bubbles up after the war and just all the questions it raises. So where should I go? I'll talk about the course reader article. We have the werewolves here. So basically with that, we were reading about kind of the Nazi werewolf myth almost. It's not a myth, but we basically had these, after the war, I believe, these soldiers that were still in Germany and America was occupying it, and SS leaders that were still in Germany were trying to invoke fear by calling themselves werewolves and acting as if they were kind of embodying the werewolf-like persona to really scare American people and to have them fearing Germany. And that works on America. It creates a complete hysteria in the US, which brings a ton of troops into Germany, and you can't go outside. There's no fraternizing with the other German people. It really puts a scare and a hold on the American public and American soldiers that's not really there. It's kind of made up. And I have the werewolf photo next to Hitler with some Hitler Youth. And I think that actually played a big part in it as well, for the American public at least, because I think they recognized that there was Hitler Youth out there. So they didn't know, like these kids after the war are growing up, so they don't know how many Hitler sympathizers and people who are still kind of fighting for the Nazi regime are out there. So it's just kind of, even though there's not really once the war is over, it's easy for America to kind of get a grip on the German situation, but it did create a ton of hysteria. And how the author kind of ties this in, her special point or thesis, we'll say, is well, she brings it into the situation in Iraq with the Bush administration and how political leaders can um, kind of draw upon these myths and like very like scary imagery that is created in pop culture that the American people like are very familiar with, and like certain emotions are tied to them because of pop culture. And when those images are brought up, Americans feel a certain way, even though the history of it is not that drastic and nothing really changed from the actual Nazi werewolves. Just the thought of it is able to carry a lot of weight with American people in the public later when the Bush administration uses it, just because of that name of werewolf and how in popular culture they just kind of, all the movies and everything that came with it, just it comes with its own baggage that the Bush administration was trying to use so that they could basically justify their political actions in the way they were operating in Iraq. So you just kind of see how propaganda and right here the werewolf can, create a lot, even though the history of it doesn't really support it. So it's very important to know the history so we can see through these kind of deceptions and motivations that lie beneath um, what political leaders do. I think that's very important. So what else do I need to touch on? So I'll go down here. I put a photo of the famous baseball player, one of the greatest players ever, Ted Williams. And he just kind of, or at least for baseball players back then, the real stars of it, they were just kind of seen as the American heroes, and they basically embodied all traditional American values. And just he was kind of the American dream just as a person. And he played baseball and then went to war, or he went and fought in World War II, came back, played some more baseball, and then had to go to the Korean War, and then came back. So I think this just kind of shows the like level of patriotism at this time and how everyone was kind of unified. And you see somebody like Ted Williams, a celebrity, one of the biggest names at the time, go into war. You can kind of see how like it's touching everyone. It's kind of a role model, or just the traditional American values of, being there to defend your country. I think he kind of represents the unity that was felt at this time. So I just included him just because I thought he had a cool story, kind of. And I'll go up here. And for the atomic bomb, I was reading a post from Reese, I believe, and he was kind of talking about how one of the biggest outcomes was just the use of the nuclear bomb, and how just kind of how it opened such a can of worms, which I really agreed with, and I didn't really touch on that much in my own discussion post. But the dropping of this bomb, it just everything from like radiation and like having to study this nuclear energy to like the way it and that's just kind of on a scientific front, but also in terms of other countries developing it, like Russia after the war. You just can kind of see how we can get to this point of mutually assured destruction, basically how now this like super weapon has been introduced, and now because we used it, so it's just now it's out there, and people are gonna, if it's out there, people are gonna learn how to build it. So now we're just kind of, at least now in modern day, we're just at the point where now every country basically has this weapon that can, wipe out cities just in the blink of an eye. So that really just changes how war is dealt with and how political leaders negotiate. And just this is just kind of a looming threat that is over, I think, every country. So it really just changes the way I think everyone looks at the world. And now this is the biggest threat, I think. I think a lot of people, besides global warming, it's that the countries could maybe just possibly destroy each other with these weapons. So America, for better or for worse, uses this weapon. And you can kind of see here, I got Iwo Jima. They triumphed. They won this war, but it could be at a cost that could not be worth it later on down the road if nuclear fallout begins. So I think that's just one more juxtaposition there. So just, I feel like to encapsulate my whole thinking on this chapter is that there's a lot of duality to this war, a lot of prosperity to come with it, but a lot of divisions and debates come to the surface that need to be debated. But overall, America comes into this war one country, and I think leaves it drastically different more than any other event that I've learned about. So I had a pleasure doing this. Thank you guys for watching and have a good one. Stuff this. All right. Thank you. Sorry, I got one more thing. I know this is running a little long, but I would be mad myself if I didn't mention it. It was from Audrey, and this was in the World War II discussion post, and she kind of talked about it's important to study wars because you can really see the cause and effects and just really specific consequences of certain events. So she was kind of talking about how after World War One, Germany was put in a place where they're super financially vulnerable and they had a war debt basically placed on them that they could not pay. For one, it was just extremely hard on them, along with the failure of the League of Nations, and then the global economic crisis that just kind of, or depression that came with it after the war. So that kind of led for the ability for the Nazi regime and Hitler to kind of come into Germany and gain a lot of power there. So it's important to recognize those consequences and see how can we prevent that in the future. She ended her post saying that two democracies had never gone to war, which I had no idea. And knowing that makes it seem like I think other countries that aren't a democracy should really, look at history and see that um, it could be a valuable system and way of carrying a country into the future. So I just think that was a super cool idea and concept that she brought about. So sorry about that. Thank you. Um, I will see you guys later.